Good morning. Welcome to the Cambridge Fortune News Hour for the 10th month, 12th day by the Heavenly Calendar, and the 16th year of Changi Tim Elder. Tim Elder sitting in for the second king of Chenugu, Hyung Jin Moon. And as you can see, I am back with my usual backdrop, and that's good news. Yes. Oh boy. For some reason, they say, I guess it's because of the switch from daylight saving time to standard time, but the flight now takes 16 hours. 16 hours. It's a long time. Ah, when I arrived, I told myself, I gotta find a way to make enough money to start riding business class because this is really, you know, this is this is not sustainable over. But anyway, well, I don't know. I have to find some business making, some money making ideas, I suppose. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get to the it's our little sojourn around the kingdom. See what's happening right now in Tokyo, Tennessee. It's a pool of 29 degrees, clear skies, and today getting up to 46 with intervals of clouds and sunshine. Tonight, rain in the forecast, and low of 39. And in father's hometown in Cheongju, North Gangwon province of Korea. Today, right now, currently in North Korea, currently 29 and partly cloudy, getting down to 12 degrees tonight. Oh boy. Yeah. The winter is there. Yes. Partly cloudy and colder. Yes. And unfortunately, the people there, uh, cold is, I mean, here in South Korea, we have heated floors and stuff, but I just wonder how much heated floors they have there in Cheongju. Probably not very much. I can stay warm tonight. Anyway, tomorrow very cold with plenty of sunshine, high of 21. That's a high degrees. High is 21. And in northeast Pennsylvania at the Chernagun Palace, partly cloudy and 33. Intervals of clouds and sunshine today, high of 38, getting down to 25 tonight with clear to partly cloudy this evening, becoming overcast with a bit of snow toward dawn with little or no accumulation at the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Liberty Rock in the Limestone County, Texas, 40 degrees and cloudy. And today, cold with occasional rain, high of 43. Tonight, getting down to 31 with partly cloudy and cold, freezing temperatures in the normally colder spots. And at the Suncheon Palace in Korea, 45 degrees and clear right now, colder with thickening clouds, low of 30 degrees tomorrow, mostly sunny and high of 52. And at the Gunma Palaces in Japan, 54 degrees, mostly cloudy, partly cloudy, and a low of 43. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy, high of 61. And in Guangdong province, clear and 77 degrees right now. Low of, low tonight, 66, partly cloudy, warm and humid. Tomorrow, rather cloudy and humid, a high of 76. Let's go to Father's Word. Let's see here. How am I sitting here? Okay, then we can go to the Cheonsonggyong today. And let's see, I'm in the book on the root of the universe. Father speaking January 16th, 1975. Where is the path that enables us to become one? And the path that can be the beginning point of peace. 하나님 자신뿐만 아니라 참된 인간은 위에서 사는 존재라는 원칙을 세우지 않을 수 없었던 것입니다. Not only God Himself, but also 원칙을 세우지 않을. Let me start again. It was 원칙을 세우지 않았을 수 없었던 것. It was necessary for God to establish the principle. There's the principle with a small p, right? 원칙, not worldly. 원칙. To establish the principle. Is that the best way to translate 원칙? Or 원칙 is, I think it is. to establish the principle that not only God, but also true human beings are existences that live for the sake of others. Right? 그렇기 때문에 참된 사랑은 위하는 데서부터 참된 이상도 위하는 데서부터 참된 평화, 참된 행복도 위하는 자리에 소립되지 위하는 자리를 떠나서는 찾을 수 없습니다. So, for this reason, true love, uh, 행복도 위하는 자리에서 소립돼. So, true love and true ideals, true peace, true happiness, all begin, uh, or all can be established in the position of living for the sake of others, and we cannot seek these apart from such a from such a position of living for the sake of others. And we human beings, and Father does use the we here, we human beings did not realize that this was this was fundamental to the creation of heaven and earth. 천지창조의 근본이라는 것을 우리 인간은 몰랐습니다. We didn't know that this was fundamental to the creation of heaven and earth. So living for the sake of others is fundamental to the way that heaven and earth were created. So um, not living for ourselves, but living for the sake of others. That's very, very instructive. Praise God for the word that He has given us this morning. Praise God. Okay, thank you, Father. Okay. All right. What's going on today? Well, during the weekend, of course, President Trump uh, announced that he was closing the airspace over Venezuela. That means that the U.S. Air Force is taking control of that airspace, and no civilian flights, no flights by the Venezuelans themselves will be allowed. Basically, it's a no-fly zone. I guess that's what it means. That airspace is closed. No one is allowed to fly, of course, except for the U.S. Air Force. And I guess not just Air Force, but also Navy uh, and other U.S. Forces. So that means probably that, well, he's at least getting ready to. Um, is my does this thing keep? No, it keeps moving. It seems like. Anyway, okay. I don't see why it should be okay. Anyway, okay. So this means that it did it again, didn't it? Just now. Why think what's going on here? Oh, it did it again, and it keeps moving. Oh, I see. Oh, I see what's happening. I'm kicking the I'm kicking the camera. That'll do it. I thought it was some AI. No, it's just me kicking the camera stand. Okay, okay. Sorry. So anyway, my point is that it looks like he's getting ready to start uh, operations against drug traffickers or alleged drug traffickers on the land in Venezuela. And I'm not too excited about that, especially since he's not doing anything on reducing the demand. He's just trying to reduce the supply. But if Venezuela doesn't do it, somebody else will. Of course, I understand. People have pointed out that actually the Trump's actions against Venezuela are also indirectly actions against China, since China has a close relationship with Venezuela, and if he can bring about a regime change in Venezuela, then he can do something with the fact that Venezuela is exporting, or yeah, well, I guess handing over its oil to China, and perhaps a Trump-friendly or U.S.-friendly regime would not be doing that. So this is a sort of I don't know if proxy war is the right word, but anyway, this is indirectly a war against China. In addition, the reports are that he's offering Maduro a chance to apply for asylum or to get himself out of Venezuela. And that also indicates that he wants to put someone in power in Venezuela who will be friendly to the United States and to the Trump administration. And we'll see how that works out. Okay. Anyway, the U.S. and Central America, have a long and very storied history, going back some 100 years or so, uh, beginning, I suppose, with the Spanish American War in 1898. But yeah, basically around that time, and ever since then, every time there was a problem in Central America, especially well, during the first half of the 20th century and even into the second half, every time there was a problem, the U.S. would say, "Well, send in the Marines, send in the Marines," and it's not been a very, very, very good history. And unfortunately, it looks like President Trump is going to continue that history. I understand the need to, you know, do something about the fact that so many Americans are dying of drugs, but I really think the emphasis should be on the demand side and not on the supply side. And the demand side is not something that you can cure with bombs, right? It's something that you have to establish. We have to establish strong families, strengthen the American family, strengthen the American family, right? Rebuild the American family. So much has been done for the past 60 years, particularly 60 maybe, plus years, to undermine the American family, to undermine the position of the father in the American family, and to reduce the number of two-parent families. And the welfare situation is one of those where, in many cases, women are incentivized to not have a husband in the home, not have a father in the home, so they can receive more welfare from the state. And but also the whole thing about homosexual marriage has also undermined the American family as well, because um, children need a father and a mother, and uh, they need a father who is a biological father and a mother who is a biological mother. And the whole thing with the divorce as well, where it is so easy for families to be broken up through divorce simply because people say, well, we just can't get along. We have irreconcilable differences. So we're just gonna, cash in and go find different partners, and then the kids can have several, uh, a string of fathers-in-law, stepdads, and then that leads to, you know, that can lead to child abuse, and it does lead to child abuse. Fortunately, America, doesn't have that basic building block of society, which is the two-parent heterosexual uh, family, two-parent family, heterosexual two-parent family. And that, of course, is leading to increased drug abuse. And that's where if that was the cause, then we need to attack that cause. The cause was not that Venezuela was shipping drugs to America. That was not the cause. Once the demand was created in Venezuela, and of course, other countries, Colombia, Afghanistan, the what is it, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and what other places? Places around the world have been cashing in on this demand that has been created in the United States. So we need to look at the cause of the demand and then deal with that cause. But even Trump doesn't want to do that. Of course, bombing boats out of the water, that makes for um, flashy videos that people say, hey, go get him, go get him, go get him. The MAGA people, I'm sure, will say that, but it's not dealing with the cause. And as far as the people who are on those boats, you got to wonder, they know that they're risking their lives to go. What? They're risking their lives by not going because the cartels are saying, hey, you know what? If you don't go, 100% we will kill you if you don't go. If you do go out into the water with this drug boat and attempt to deliver it to the United States, then maybe you will get killed. But that's a maybe. If you don't go, it's a sure thing. So which do you want? Do you want a sure death or a maybe death? And offered that choice, the people are going to choose the maybe instead of the sure thing. And so the boats keep coming, and that's the only way I can explain why the boats would keep coming. I think there's some leftist media have gone down and sort of interviewed the families of people who have been killed in these raids or these bombings, but I don't think they've really gotten into the question of why do you keep going if you know that there's a pretty good probability that you're going to get killed. But I think the cartels are pressuring people in that way. So we'll see. But okay, so he stops Venezuela. He creates a new regime in Venezuela, and that regime stops the drug smuggling from Venezuela and stops the sending oil to China. Then what? Then what? Well, some other country will take over the will take over the role. The cartels will just go to some other country, and the whole thing will start all over again. So unfortunately, uh, things are not looking too good on that score. And President Trump's popularity or public support, people are saying it is the worst since his inauguration, and unfortunately, that is borne out with Rasmussen as well. I see now on Friday, no, today. Oh, okay, they already have the result out for today. Um, 46% in support, and that's 46 is, well, the lowest he's been was 44, which was the middle of November, 14th of November, 14th and 16th, 15, 14, 15, 16, he was 44%. But anyway, he's at the low end of the range right now of his support, and partly that's uh, because of the rise in prices that people are experiencing, and but also partly, I think, the fact that he's blowing these boats out of the water is not really gaining a whole lot of support from people. Some people, of course, look at those videos and say, "Yeah, right, go, go, go," but other people realize that this is kind of um, dealing with the superficial aspect of it. As the drugs keep coming, the drugs are still there, right? They're not. It's not as if the drugs have dried up on the U.S. streets. They're still coming. Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's look at something else now. This situation in Minnesota, where I think we looked at it end of last week as well, where there's so much welfare fraud um, involving the Somali community there, and governor or the former or the former governor Walz is being blamed for this. Well, I guess he's current governor as well, but more than 400 employees of the Minnesota. Let's look at this. Human Services accused Governor Tim Walz, of course, he was Kamala Harris's vice president running mate, of failing to act on widespread fraud warnings and retaliating against whistleblowers. The Minnesota Department of Human Services employees account, which says it consists of more than 480 current staff members of the Minnesota DHS, wrote on X that Walz is 100% responsible for the massive fraud in Minnesota. We let Tim Walz know of fraud early on, hoping for a partnership in stopping fraud, but no, we got the opposite response. Tim Walz systematically retaliated against whistleblowers using monitoring, threats, repression, and did his best to discredit fraud reports. The group claimed, in addition to retaliating against whistleblowers, Tim Walz disempowered the Office of the Legislative Auditor, allowing agencies to disregard their audit findings and guidance. Walz's office did not immediately respond to Fox. The group's claims come as federal prosecutors continue to unravel one of the nation's largest COVID-era fraud cases. The Justice Department announced new charges last week against the 78th defendant in the Feeding Our Future fraud scheme, which prosecutors say involved more than $250 million in stolen funds from a federally funded child nutrition program and has already resulted in over 50 convictions. Many of the individuals charged come from Minnesota's Somali community. The New York Times reported that what initially appeared to many Minnesotans as an isolated case of pandemic-era fraud has broadened into a much wider concern for state and federal officials. The Times reported that over the past 5 years, according to law enforcement authorities, several fraud schemes proliferated in parts of Minnesota's Somali community. A number of individuals allegedly created companies that billed state agencies for millions of dollars worth of social services that were never delivered. The Manhattan Institute's City Journal also alleged in a report citing unnamed federal counterterrorism sources that some stolen funds were transferred to Somalia and may have ended up with the terror group Al-Shabaab, though none of the federal charges in the fraud case include any link to terrorism. Walz addressed the fraud at a press conference last week, saying it undermines trust in government and undermines programs that are already critical in improving undermines programs that are absolutely critical in improving quality of life. If you're committing fraud, no matter where you come from, what you look like, what you believe in, you are going to go to jail, Walz said. So now he says it now that they're on to him. Walz faced a question about the situation on NBC's Meet the Press on Sunday when host Kristen Welker pressed him on the allegations and asked him if he takes responsibility for failing to stop the fraud in his state. Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail, the governor responded. I will note it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous, well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals. Those people are going to go to jail. We're doing everything we can, but to demonize an entire community on the actions of a few, it's lazy, he said. Trump said on November 21, Truth Social post that he would be terminating the temporary protected status for Somalis in Minnesota, citing fraudulent money laundering activity. Send them back to where they came from. It's over, he wrote. Yes. And, punishing the entire group because of the actions of, I don't know if it's a few, it's a 78th defendant, and how many of them are Somalis? But anyway, apparently a substantial number are. But this is sort of this is an example, I guess, of what do you call it? A group indemnity. What's it called? Anyway, it's going to end the protected status, and that's probably a valid response, I think. And some people who are innocent will also get sent back to Somalia, but the there has to be a very firm response to something like this, that where America's generosity is taken advantage of. So I think President Trump is right in removing the protected status. And some people who are in the U.S. For other reasons, for example, maybe they've married a U.S. citizen and so forth, they have visas then that are apart from that protected status, they'll be able to stay. But those who are here under that temporary protected status will probably have to leave. And that protected status, U.S. gives protected status to all kinds of people, right? Maybe if there's an earthquake in your country, oh, okay, well, then you're protected status. Or if there was a lot of criminal activity, gang activity in your country, oh, okay, well, we'll give you protected status. Or maybe there was a drought or a hurricane or whatever in your country. Oh, so many countries now have this protected status. I wonder how many countries have temporary protected status in the US. Will they tell me? 17 countries. Okay. As of now, there are 17 countries. This is according to the Google AI. Actually, this is leading me to the US CIS, Citizenship and Immigration Services website. And let's see here. Countries currently designated TPS. Okay, here we go. Burma, El Salvador, Ethiopia, Haiti, Lebanon, Somalia, South Sudan, Syria, Ukraine, Venezuela, and Yemen. So these 17 countries, for various reasons, whether it's Burma, I suppose it's the civil war. El Salvador, I think you can remove that one. Why is El Salvador still on the list? Let me take here. Okay. Does it say why? I think El Salvador should be removed. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Let me look at this once again. EPS continued through, so currently it's continued through September 9th, 2026. So maybe they'll take a look at it then. And let's see, re-registration period for people who already have continuous residence in the United States since 2001. Hmm. Checking something here. Oh, okay. Termination of the designation of El Salvador for temporary protected status. All right. Oh, this was 2018. This was 2018. Anyway, so I don't know why El Salvador is still on the list. Maybe that would be a good one to take off. Okay. Anyway, 17 countries right now have this temporary protected status, including Somalia, including El Salvador. But surely El Salvador must be taken off. Okay. All right, let's see here. What else is going on then? And I wanted to go today, before I go to Japan, yeah, I have a longish one on Japan, which involves China. But anyway, I wanted to point out this one here. This is kind of a strange story here, where China has built a airport in Indonesia, which apparently is unsupervised, I guess, I think. Here, let's see what's going on here. Um, View of Indonesia Morowali Industrial Park that consists of around 77,000 local workers and around 6,000 Chinese workers in Morowali, central Sulawesi in Indonesia on August 2nd, 2023. So this is about a more than 2 year old photograph. Okay. A lack of oversight of the operations of a Chinese majority owned and operated private airport in Indonesia's liquid processing region of Morowali poses a potential threat to the country's sovereignty and economic stability, its defense ministry has warned. I have no idea how to pronounce his name, has raised concerns during the Indonesian Armed Forces integrated exercise in the region on November 20th, claiming the airport was operating without any state apparatus on site. The absence of government officials at such a critical infrastructure facility could expose the country to economic sovereignty risks, he said, adding that a facility operating without a state presence was an anomaly. The republic must not have a republic within it. We must uphold all provisions without looking at the background of where they come from, he said in a written statement quoted from the Ministry of Defense website on November 26th. His concerns were echoed by members of parliament and highlighted potential violations of legal regulations as well as risks for security and sovereignty. In response, the Transportation Ministry claimed the airport held valid permits and dismissed the suggestions that the airport lacked state oversight. The airport is designated as a domestic special airport owned and operated by PTIMIP, whatever that is. And the ownership of the company is complex. All right. So one of the so here in it is a joint venture between Shanghai Decent Investment Group. Well, I'm glad they're decent. Itself a subsidiary of Jingshan Group, one of the largest private stainless steel manufacturers in China. And also then, so they have what, 49.69%. And then this Indonesia company has 25.31%. And then the Sulawesi Mining Company also is 25%. So together they hold 50.31%, right? So technically it is majority Indonesian, just barely, but well, things can when the ownership difference is this close, all sorts of strange things can happen. But SMI is also a joint venture. Oh, look at this. So one of those Indonesian companies is also a joint venture between the Shanghai Decent Investment Group and PT Bintang Delapan Group. So actually then, uh-huh. So you have to divide that. I don't know if it's 50-50. So in effect, the Shanghai Decent Group holds 66.25% of the shares, and the Indonesian company has 33.75 effectively. While it is a private company, Tsingshan's projects in Indonesia have received support from the Chinese Communist parties. Now, let's not use words like private company in China, right? Technically, I suppose it is a private company, but any company in China is loyal to the Chinese Communist Party. If they're not, they get closed down. So anyway, they received support from the Belt and Road Initiative, including loans from state-owned banks such as the China Development Bank and the Bank of China. So they are completely beholden to the Chinese Communist Party. And there have also been reports that the company is in advanced talks to sell some of its Indonesian assets to the China Baowu Steel Group, a state-owned enterprise. So Indonesia, yeah, I think is in some trouble here. And Indonesia, of course, when Japan decided to, you know, uh, go to war against Western colonialism, otherwise known as World War II or the Pacific War, their main objective was oil fields in Indonesia and the resources in Indonesia. So I'm sure China also right now is very much interested in gaining control of the resources, the underground resources in Indonesia. And, well, we'll see how that develops. Well, Indonesia will also become a client state of China, or at least in this case, develop a. Indonesia may discover that it has a state within a state there in China, in its within its country. Indonesia has so many islands, right? And um, I'm sure it's difficult sometimes to make sure that the central government's control is being exercised throughout the many islands. And it would be good if the model that we have was not centralized control, but it is. And so, if it's going to be centralized control, then have centralized control. Or if you're going to have you know, distributed control, then that's one thing. But that's not what's going on here. And distributed control relies on people in the local area being in control of their own resources and of their own lands. And obviously, that is not being done here at all. either way, centralized control is failing and local control is also failing. And so here, let's look at oh yes, so I wanted now to go to the situation in Japan. So this is a leftist article, and but I think we can use it to look at. We can read through the leftism and read between the lines here and figure out exactly what's going on. Let's see here. So the title is Behind Diplomatic Crisis, Japan's Economic Slide. So we've been talking about Japan's diplomatic crisis with China. Um, Prime Minister Takaichi has made remarks about Taiwan. If China attacks Taiwan, then this will be a matter of Japan's existence. It will be existence threatening, she has said. And so Japan will have to do something about it, and implying that that the Japanese military, and yes, they do have a military, no matter what the Constitution says, they have a very strong military. So Japan's military will have to play some sort of role there in a military clash between China and Taiwan. And so this article is saying that there is economic situation behind that, Japan's economic slide. And it is true that Japan is also suffering um, economic problems, to say the least. But anyway, we'll see. We'll pick through this article here and see what's going on. Let me bring it up for you. Okay. All right. I think we can skip through the first part where it says, we have these what she said and stuff like that. Um, and so this article says, this crisis has been long in coming. Takaichi needs a geopolitical spat to steer attention away from Japan's secular economic challenges. And there may be something to that, but Takaichi is clearly a hawk when it comes to China. And when the LDP chose her as its prime minister, it indicated that the LDP as a whole also wanted to take a hawkish stand against China. So I don't think it's just Takaichi just saying, well, we need something to distract people away from the economic challenges. I think the two are relatively separate. So I disagree here that Takaichi needs a geopolitical spat to steer attention away. I don't think that it's simply a matter of distracting people. Anyway, here, instead of a continued partnership with the centrist Komeito Party, Takaichi launched her coalition with the center-right Nippon Ishin Party. Well, this implies that Takaichi somehow decided to kick out the Komeito Party from the coalition, and the opposite was the case. She went to a meeting with the head of the Komeito Party, thinking that Komeito was going to sort of engage in some negotiations with her, but instead the Komeito Party said, "Hey, you know what? We've decided just to cut our ties immediately." It was not her action; it was not her idea to cut ties, and it may have happened anyway. Probably would have happened anyway because Komeito is a pro-China party, or at least relatively well, very relatively, but yes, strongly friendly towards China, right? Let's put it that way. They like China, and they were an ally of the LDP, the governing party, for many many decades, for 26 years, and that made the governing coalition very pro-China. And the Komeito deciding to leave the coalition as a result of Takaichi coming in as prime minister was a good thing for Japan in terms of God's providence for Japan. And yes, and so then she had no choice then but to go to other parties in order to find the votes that were necessary for her to be elected as prime minister in the lower house of the legislature, which is called the Diet. And so initially, it says here, Takaichi's cabinet enjoyed some of the highest approval ratings, 65 to 85%, of any Japanese government in the last 2 decades. Japanese governments, their approval rating is generally in the 30s or 40s. So 65 to 85 is incredible. With strong support among young and middle-aged respondents, the Japanese see The Japanese see as the administration's national priority in tackling inflation, 84%, economic stimulus, 64%, Social Security, 53%, and security, 47%. Bread and butter issues supersede military issues by far. Okay. Uh, Only a minority of Japanese approved of Hagiuda Koichi, who had previously been involved in a slush fund scandal, being appointed as executive acting secretary general. After Abe's assassination, ties between the LDP and Unification Church came under scrutiny, and Hagiuda had intimate ties with the controversial church. Okay, I don't know about that. Anyway, we'll pass over that one. Moreover, Takaichi and Hagiuda are members of the Nippon Kaigi. Now, this one is important, but it's given from a leftist perspective. So, members of the Nippon Kaigi, Japan's largest far-right and ultra-nationalist non-governmental organization. It seeks to change the post-war Tokyo Tribunal's view of Japanese history, restore the divine status of Japan's emperor, and undermine gender equality. It champions official visits to Japanese war criminals' Yasukuni Shrine and denies the forced prostitution of the comfort women in World War II. Now, some of this is correct. Some of this is correct, but it visit says the war criminals Yasukuni Shrine. Now, yes, some people who were convicted of war criminals by the Tokyo Tribunal in the 1940s are, what we say, enshrined here, I guess, venerated here or enshrined at the Yasukuni Shrine. That's true. But they're not the only ones, all right? They're not the only ones who are enshrined in Yasukuni Shrine. There are many, many others who died for their country who are enshrined in Yasukuni Shrine. Uh, so to imply that this is the Japanese war criminals Yasukuni Shrine, as if the shrine somehow is a possession of the war criminals, is completely false and misleading, uh, misleading at best. Okay. Now let's see. Let's look at the rest of it. Nippon Kaigi. Okay. Anyway, changing the post-war Tokyo Tribunal's view of Japanese history. The Tokyo Tribunal, of course, was, like the Nuremberg trials in Germany. After the Second World War, the Allies set up this tribunal um, to try certain military leaders, and a number of people were classified as Class A war criminals. And there were different classes of war criminals, and the number of Class A war criminals were designated then, and some of them were executed, and then some of them were enshrined at the Yasukuni Shrine, and that's where the problem with the Yasukuni Shrine comes from. Now, so to change the tribunal's view of Japanese history, well, I don't know if it was the tribunal's. I don't think the tribunal put forth a view of Japanese history, but certainly the um, the MacArthur or the Allied occupation of Japan did put forth a certain view of Japanese history. Japan was occupied by the U.S. and Allied countries from 1945 to 1952 for 7 years, and during those 7 years, the Allies uh, imposed a number of things on Japan, which Japan has not changed. The Constitution, for example, was imposed on Japan, but Japan has not changed that constitution. It has not had a single amendment. All right, I don't think how many times the U.S. Constitution has been amended, but the Japanese Constitution over the past 80 years has not had a single amendment. Well, it hasn't been quite 80 years, but close to 80 years. And the view of Japanese history. When I was in elementary school, we learned Japanese mythology, and we learned it as mythology. All right, about the sun goddess and everything. But just to, I was in elementary school. I guess during the late. Well, I guess I was starting the late fifties, I suppose, and going into the mid '60s, around what 63, 64, something like that. And so think about it. It was less than 20 years since the end of World War II. So think about it, my teachers. they must have been, or probably at least some of them were somehow involved in the military because everyone in Japan was back then during the war. So anyway, they were teaching us what before 1945, before surrender, had been taught as fact about the sun goddess and the emperor being descended from the sun goddess and all that. Um, so yes, there are people who want to go back to that, but I think they're a very small minority right now in Japan. Restore the divine status of Japan's emperor. Uh, Shinto, I think, probably does this, but I doubt that. They say that this is the largest far right and ultranationalist non-government organization, making it seem that this is a very huge organization. But I don't think it's that huge. And I don't think all that many people want to restore the divine status of Japan's emperor. Undermine gender equality. Well, yeah, I think, the idea of gender equality in Japan has not really caught hold with a lot of people, despite the efforts of some to the leftists to completely destroy the traditional Confucian idea of a relationship between men and women. But I think still in Japan, the um, heterosexual two-parent family is still considered to be the norm, although that norm is very much weakened, but still it's considered to be the norm and perhaps the standard that the people should aspire to, even if a growing number of people are not actually meeting that norm. And it champions official visits to Japan's work to Yasukuni Shrine. And that's probably true that it champions these visits, I'm sure is true. Okay. And denies the forced prostitution of the comfort women in World War II. And this has been a controversial issue, yes, in the whether these whether this was forced prostitution or whether these were women who were trying to make a buck and decided that this would be a good way for them to survive, and so they volunteered for this kind of work, is a controversial issue in Japan and in Korea. And so it says here that Nippon Kaigi has a significant presence in the Japanese parliament, and 6 prime ministers have been its members. That may well be true. The effective goal of Takaichi is to mainstream Nippon Kaigi and cement a deeper military relationship with the U.S. So, this idea of mainstreaming Nippon Kaigi, I think, may be too far, but certainly cementing a deeper military relationship with the U.S. is certainly true. And I may be naive about Nippon Kaigi. I don't know. I'll have to research this a little bit more. But it's not something that comes up in Japanese media very often at all, that's for sure. But now, okay, so now we get into the economic stuff. And this is, I think, important for us to understand. Last week, Japan's cabinet approved a $135 billion stimulus package to address rising living costs and boost economic growth by strategic investments in semiconductors and artificial intelligence. Okay, so they're increasing the money supply. Well, we know where that leads. For months, Takaichi had called for responsible, proactive fiscal policy. However, it is not clear how she plans to balance fiscal prudence with still more spending. Well, what she means by responsible, proactive fiscal policy does not mean balancing fiscal prudence. She's basically going to just spend, 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 I think, and almost like a modern monetary theorist who thinks that you know government can spend as much as they want. Um, so I don't think she's going to try to balance. You know, the word prudence, I don't think it really plays a big big role in her monetary and her government policy and in fiscal policy. In both absolute and relative terms, Japan holds the largest debt burden globally, amounting close to $10 trillion, more than double the size of its economy. The US now has 38 trillion, Japan 10 trillion, but Japan has a smaller economy, and this is more than double the size. $10 trillion is more than double the size of its economy. The high debt to GDP ratio has not caused, US is worried that its debt to GDP ratio is now above 120%. Japan is more than doubles, more than 200%. In fact, well over 200%. It's crazy, but there is a reason that Japan can have that much debt and still not collapse. The high debt to GDP ratio has not caused a collapse because much of the debt is held by domestic investors and interest rates remain low. Japanese are savers, and they like to invest in their own country's debt, in their own country's bonds. And so they have a very high savings rate. And this is one important difference with the United States. In the US, there's always this pressure that I've been talking about to spend, 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 consume, 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 right? We got to consume because consumers account for what is it, 80 some percent of America's GDP. It's an astronomical figure, 87%. But in Japan, I don't know what the ratio is in Japan, but the Japanese have always been savers. And this, of course, is because they have suffered uh, situations in the past where it was good to have been a saver, right? Where uh, for the collapse, of course, for the collapse of the economy, of course, after World War II and so forth. While the ratio has been decreasing since the COVID-19 pandemic, Takaichi's stimulus policies could reverse the trend. That's very possible. I think that is probably true. Furthermore, years of fiscal stimulus, social welfare spending, an aging and shrinking population coupled with stagnation compound the debt burden. And, the social welfare spending, unfortunately, Confucianism teaches that the government or the head of government is the father figure of the country. And it's the responsibility of the father figure to take care of the members of the family. In other words, the citizens. Um, and unfortunately, this translates into the government stealing from some in order to give to others. And that is seen as normal by many people in Japan and in Korea. That is that the rebalancing of wealth among citizens is a role of the government. I've heard this both in Korea and in Japan. People are telling me this. Rebalancing wealth. What does that mean? Well, it means you take from some and give to others. An aging and shrinking population coupled with stagnation compounded the debt burden. Yes. Okay. By increasing national debt, Takaichi's stimulus could lead to higher interest rates and a weaker yen. Higher interest rates because there will be less demand now for the Japanese bonds, and with less demand, that means that prices will have to come down, and if prices come down, and the interest rate goes up, or the yield goes up. Weaker yen, yes. Right now, yen is around 157 yen to the dollar, and it's likely to grow even weaker. That would trigger inflation. Inflation because Japan, a weaker yen means that imports become more expensive, and Japan has to import basically all of its energy in terms of oil and a lot of its coal and iron and so forth. But a lot of its resources have to be imported. There's some coal still in Japan, but people don't like to have the mines around and so forth, and so they import most of their resources, and those become more expensive, which could erode the effectiveness of the stimulus. Yes, a loss of investor confidence, even capital flight, with negative global spillover effects. So that is all true, I suspect. Early signs reflect rising unease in the Japanese markets. These worries are mirrored by rising Japanese government bond yields. Recently, the yield on the benchmark 10-year JGB is Japan government bond hit 1.835%, the highest since summer 2008. So you notice how 1%, the US 10-year bond is around 4% now. So there's a big difference between the Japanese bond yield and the US bond yield. Similarly, the yen briefly softened to 157.90 against the dollar amid fiscal fears and receding expectations for an imminent BOJ rate hike. So why is the Japanese bond has such a low rate? Low rate means what? The price is high. Price is high means what? That the demand is high. Why is there so much demand for the Japanese bond? Well, it's because overseas investors, and I suppose Japanese investors as well, borrow money in Japan at a cheap rate, and then take that money elsewhere to other countries and invest it for a higher rate. And that's one way in which people make money. This is called the Japan carry trade. And it's a trade, it's a sort of a way of making money that relies on the fact that Japanese bonds have a low yield. And so if Japanese bond yields rise, that means that people who have been doing the Japan carry trade are going to say, whoa, wait a second, this may become bad for me. I may start losing money. I can't borrow from Japan anymore. So then what do I do? Well, then I have to unwind, or in other words, to pay back those, or to what shall we say, to monetize those investments that I've made other places, get the money, bring it back to Japan, and then repay the loan that I borrowed in Japan. So that would affect the world economy then, if less money is being invested around the world in that way. So in the Japanese markets, these worries are mirrored. Okay, well, this paragraph for some reason is a repeating of the first paragraph. Assuming erosion in physical and monetary credibility, yen depreciation is likely to foster rising prices, right? Because yen depreciation means that it costs more to buy the same number of dollars, and that would then raise import prices. In that case, the effectiveness of the stimulus package could be undermined, which would compel Takaichi's cabinet to demand more stimulus, which in turn would further penalize medium to long-term economic and financial market stability, as well, all true. This is a basic contradiction. This is the basic contradiction that the Abe cabinets managed to contain. The stated effort to achieve sound economic fundamentals versus the nagging need for a continuous stimulus package to revive the stagnant economy. Worse, Takaichi cabinet's starting point is more fragile, as evidenced by the weakening yen. As the Takaichi cabinet has stressed the importance for policy coordination with the Bank of Japan, the central bank may find it challenging to raise interest rates in December, even despite inflation at 3% in October. The coordination between the two could contribute to adverse pent-up effects in the coming months. Rising inflation is the last thing Takaichi needs. It is the greatest concern of those who elected her. And so here, talking about her ultra-conservative profile, anyway, I don't think we need to go too much into that, or you can look at it here. But so here, looking at some possibilities, a scenario. So measured de-escalation, protracted instability, full-blown escalation. We'll see what happens. But you can go into these yourself if you're interested. Okay, but we don't have time to do that right now. Okay. All right, let's see here. I did want to do this thing about Putin responding to the Ukraine peace plan. But Takaichi's main mission right now is to hold the line against China. And let's hope that she can do that. That is the most important thing. Okay. Now let's look at this one. Every word matters. Putin responds to peace plan. Let's see here. Putin said he could use Trump's peace plan as a starting point for talks to end the war. His remarks signal a tactical openness to negotiations while preserving military leverage. He called the plan a set of issues put forward for discussion and warned that if Ukrainian forces do not withdraw, Russia will use force. We need to sit down and discuss this seriously. Every word matters. An amended U.S. proposal from recent Geneva talks seeks to respond to criticism that the original plan favored the Russian demands. We'll see, but I don't think that they're going to do much compromising because I don't think they really feel a need to do that. Time is on Russia's side, it would seem, because the pressure on Ukraine to compromise is going to become greater and greater because, well, that pressure is coming from President Trump. As Trump is saying, listen, we got to get this over with. We have got to get this over with. It's coming up on 4 years now in February, and this has got to stop because the United States needs to focus elsewhere. And Biden got us into this terrible thing, and we're not going to be involved in any more 20-year wars, all right? and this is already going on 4 years, and it's got to stop. I think that's Trump's basic position, and that position favors Putin. It favors Russia, and it puts a whole lot of pressure on Ukraine. So anyway, we'll see what happens. But I think the future for Ukraine is not good. Um, I guess the solution for Ukraine is to participate in the bringing about of Chonyuguk, where there are no wars and where there are no international borders. Or, Father said no international borders, and people ask me about this. Especially in his UN speech, one that he made at the United Nations headquarters. He said no international borders, but I think we will have borders such as the similar to the border between U.S. states, like between Pennsylvania and New York, where you drive across a bridge, drive across the Delaware River, and you're in another state, and the only way you know it is because there's a signboard that says New York, welcome to New York. But like the borders that we go through when we go to a new country, like when I come to Korea, I have to show my passport, I have to, you know, show my residence card and stuff like that. Those kinds of borders, I think, will pass away in Cheongguk, and they will not exist. And I think that is the kind of international border that Father's referring to when he says no borders. All right, got to go. Glad to be back, and hope I can stay here for a while now. God bless, Godspeed. May His kingdom come quickly.